What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to the Weapon Collective. My name's Jeff, once again down in the Gat Cave, and today we're doing a viewer request for a topic that to some degree we are all familiar with. Maybe some know a whole lot about this topic and some maybe not so much, but that topic is Glock. Everybody knows the name Glock. Even if you know nothing about firearms, you've probably heard the term Glock and familiar that it is a handgun. So where do we start? Well, let's start with the inventor of the firearm, Gaston Glock, who recently passed away. He was from Austria. He was an engineer who was producing curtain rods, shovels, trenching equipment. He was producing knives, and those knives he was producing for the Austrian military, and they had polymer handles on those knives. So one day when he was at the Austrian Ministry of Defense, he overheard two military officers talking about the new gun trial to replace the Walther P38. He approached the officers, explained who he was, what he was producing for the military, and asked how he could get into the trials. They kind of laughed, but he eventually got in and got the specs for the gun. In a nutshell, it was a firearm that had to have a capacity of at least 9+1, had no greater than 58 parts, and had to have no more than 20 malfunctions in 10,000 rounds. So Gaston Glock got to work, and what he came up with would eventually be known as the Glock 17. The first polymer striker fired pistol, therefore revolutionizing the firearms industry. And from that point, I mean, it's basically history. There's been very little change to the firearm since 1980, 82, when it was adopted. The name Glock 17 has nothing to do with the capacity. It is just a coincidence that it happened to hold 17 rounds. The name actually derives from Gaston Glock's 17th patent being that firearm, so therefore it became the Glock G17. And I've tried hard to track down an original Gen 1 Glock, and I have not been able to do so, but luckily they did do a reproduction a few years ago, and this is the reproduction of the Gen 1 Glock 17. Pretty basic, no accessory rail, obviously irons only, and very basic gun. But the big breakthrough was the polymer frame. And in that trial, the Glock 17 beat out all of the other very well-known legacy firearm companies like HK, Sig Sauer, Steyr, FN, Beretta. It won the entire trial, and it's now one of the most prolific names in the firearm industry. So the Glock 17 Gen 1, I was actually able to find a Gen 2. This is an original Gen 2 Glock 17, and really the only change is that they got textured back straps and front strap on the grip, and you can see there's not a whole lot of difference in the firearm. Still no rail. Then on the Gen 3, which unfortunately I don't have a bone stock Gen 3. The closest I have is going to be something like this, and this is kind of a beater frame. But since we're talking about this gun specifically, there is a little side note here. The gun that came directly after the Glock 17 Gen 1 was the Glock 18C, which was a full auto pistol, which is super cool. Wish I had one of those. Unfortunately, I do not. But I bring that up because this Gen 3 does have a binary trigger in it. And what does that mean if you're not familiar? That means that you pull the trigger once and it fires, and you release it and it fires. So you can shoot this pistol very fast. If you didn't know any better and you just heard it, you may mistake it for a full auto. But those in the know probably would understand what they were hearing. But this isn't a great example because this frame has been stippled and had the finger grooves removed. So the distinction between the Gen 2 to the Gen 3 is, I will show you a pistol that has it, but looks more like this. It had these finger grooves. It was really more grip changes and the addition of the accessory rail. But back to the Gen 3 17, this had finger grooves at one time, and it does have the accessory rail, but that was pretty much the evolution from 2 to 3. And then from 3 to 4, which once again, I do not have a bone stock Gen 4 Glock 17. So this is a Gen 4, but there's been a lot of work done to this one. I just get this to show you that between the Gen 3 and the Gen 4, the mag release button got larger. It still retained the finger grooves. The biggest change was probably the guide rod. The Gen 3 had the single piece guide rod in it, and the Gen 4 had the 2-piece guide rod in it. And that is really the biggest distinction. And you can see the size difference here where the guide rod meets the slide. So that's one way you can tell a Gen 3 from a Gen 4, because they both have finger grooves, but Gen 4 has the larger guide rod and it has the larger mag release button. And then we get into the current generation, which is the 5th generation, the Gen 5 Glock 17. And that I did happen to have enough pieces to put together a stock Gen 5. And this one is actually just irons only, because what Glock did in recent years with the Gen 5 is do something called the Gen 5 MOS, which stands for the Glock Modular Optics System. So that means it comes with the pre-cut red dot compatibility, and it comes with plates that you can mount. The plates are not that great. I don't recommend using them. I recommend using third-party plates if you're going to run an optic on your Glock. But it is nice that they give you the option of having it pre-cut, that you do not have to send it out to a machine shop. So what else changed? Well, they deleted the finger grooves. They retained the 2-piece guide rod. And it now has ambi, slide stop, and slide release in a flared magwell. But the Gen 5 current generation, I don't know when the 6th generation will appear, but now that Gaston Glock has passed away, it'll be interesting to see the direction that Glock takes in the future, because they have done very little as far as any big shift or any real innovation. They've made very small changes, and arguably it's an extremely reliable, robust platform, but some new big thing would be fun. Nonetheless, Glock remains to be one of the most reliable, best shooting, accurate, out-of-the-box guns you can get. And maybe it hasn't changed for a good reason. That's up to you guys. There's a lot of varying opinions on this, and a lot of varying opinions on Glock itself. So that's the 1 through 5 generation of the Glock 17. And now I just want to go through the other models that I have of Glocks and kind of the things that you can do to them. So we're going to just kind of jump around, go through a whole bunch of different variations, models, and what you can do with the Glock. Because that, for me, that's a lot of what is so fun about a Glock, is you get one, and not that anything needs to be done to it. It's a perfectly great gun out of the box. But it is very fun for someone like myself that likes to customize a gun to just tear into it and have fun. You'll see some of these guns are still stock, and some of them have had a lot of work done to them. So let's take a look. Okay, since we're talking about the Glock 17, the original, let's go through some other Glock 17s and then we'll jump around to other models. All right, so this is a Gen 4 Glock 17, and this thing is pretty cool. What I really like is this frame, that it has this two-tone frame, very nice. And one downside to a Glock is arguably their triggers. And that kind of goes just across the board for striker-fired polymer handguns. They're not known for having fantastic triggers. But there are things that you can do, such as update the trigger. This has a Timney Alpha trigger in it, which is much... So, see, there's a lot of take-up in this, but crisp break, and it's light. Compared to the original, like that is a very mushy trigger with kind of a squishier, harder break. But these Timney triggers, I really like them. And once you get used to them, they are a very nice trigger. Still nowhere near the trigger that is in, like, say, a double stack 1911. Those, chef's kiss to those. But this is cool because Noveske came out with Glock slides. So this is a Glock 17 slide from Noveske and a Noveske barrel as well. If I can get that. And then this has a Trijicon SRO. It has this extended slide release, which I like. These, just a higher, you can just drop that slide really easily. This one does have a Mod Light PL350 on it. Nice weapon light. And that's about it. Has a really nice mag well and an SLR base plate on the magazine. So that's a Gen 4. And then you get into something like a Taran Tactical Glock 17. This is a Gen 5, so this is a Combat Master. And this one has a Surefire X300 Turbo with a Trijicon RMR and Coyote and Cagworks slide release. But this is a Gen 5 with a Timney trigger as well. And these are fantastic. This one is even lighter than that other one. I think Taran did some work to this. But this is a very cool gun. And then you get into companies like Agency. This is also a Gen 5 Glock 17 with an Aimpoint Acro P2, Surefire X300 Turbo, that titanium nitride Agency barrel that is ported. And if I have a whole Agency video where you can look at all my Agency guns, which are essentially Glocks, SIGs, FN 509 that have been modified, Gucci'd out, if you will. But these are kind of, you know, Taran and Agency take a stock Glock and really trick it out to something a little different than a stock Glock. And then from that Glock 17, probably the next best well-known Glock is going to be the Glock 19, which is the compact version. The Glock 19, but it holds 15 rounds, and it is perhaps the most prominent of all the Glock handguns. So I have a bunch of Glock 19s. We'll go through them really quick. So this is as close to a stock Glock 19 as I have, and all that is really different is that it has a threaded barrel. You typically wouldn't get one with the threaded barrel, but still irons only, and this is basically just a stock Glock 19, except I have a magwell on it and the threaded barrel, and that is about it. Kind of boring, but they're like all the others, there's so much you can do to it. And for example, you can get up to the MOS. This one is actually the Glock 19M, which was made for the FBI and has a couple little small differences, although I'm not sure why this is, but it's not supposed to have these slide serrations up front on the Glock 19M. Although it is a 19M, I don't know why it has the front slide serrations. But it also, this is the Holosun SCS for Glock, which fits the MOS. And this is their solar charging site, which is really cool. No battery needed and very low profile. And it actually, if you can see, the cuts on the actual optic match up with the slide serrations of the Glock. Very low profile. These are super cool. SCS from Holosun. And other than that, it's just got the magwell, and then it's a stock Glock 19 for the most part. Then you have companies like Triarch Systems, which is making a more refined version of the Glock 19. I like this thing very much. This one is a Gen 3, but it is a gorgeous gun. Has the magwell, has the Trijicon RMR, has the Agency titanium nitride barrel. I put a little gold mag release in there, and then this has the Surefire XC1 weapon light on it. This is a nice little carry gun, although I no longer carry a Glock. You can do some more crazy stuff like Agency did with this one and go with a crazy Cerakote. This one has the Holosun 508T. This one has the Radian ramjet and afterburner compensator on it. And if you haven't shot these, I also have a video on the P365 from Radian, but this is one of the easiest drop-in compensators that you can do, and it is super effective. I love Radian, but that's a side note. This is just an example. This is a Gen 5 Glock 19, and you can get all weird like this, do something crazy. You can do something really odd like this one. This is the Unity Tactical Slide with their Atom optic plate, and you can actually put an Aimpoint T2 on your handgun, that's not very practical, but it's cool. It's fun. Why? Because you can, I guess. But that's cool. Threaded barrel. One of my best shooting Glock 19s is this one. This is a Nomad Defense frame. And then this is an Agency slide and a Lantac barrel with the Trijicon RMR, Surefire X300 Ultra, and another Timney trigger. But this thing shoots just lights out. And then there's other 19s, but they're all some variation of that. And then you can go into kind of the hybrid of the 17 and the 19, which would be the Glock 45 or the Glock 19X. And once again, I know these names can be confusing at first because you're going 19X, 45, and the 45 is a 9mm. And once again, just remember that all the Glock naming is all based upon the patent. So it's 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, and it just goes in that linear direction, and it has no relevance to the caliber or capacity or anything like that. It's just the order in which they were released. And but when you get the combination of the Glock 19 and the Glock 17, you can come up with something like a Glock 19X, which is a full-size frame with the 19 size slide. So 17 frame, 19 slide. And this one is from Agency. This is an Agency 19X. And this is a dead sexy gun, if you ask me. But I love these kind of two-tone frames with that different colored stipple. I think that looks just lights out. This one, I have the Agency magwell, the Trijicon RMR, Agency titanium nitride barrel, and a Surefire X300 turbo. This is also a really cool 19X. This is from a company called Landers Weapon System, and this is their Ripper slide. So it is basically a stock 19X frame with the Landers Weapon System, which they took the Radian afterburner and ramjet barrel compensator combination, and then they Cerakote the compensator. Very nice look and very good shooting gun. This one has a Trijicon RMR and a Surefire X300 Turbo, but this is another option for a 19X. From the 19X, you have the Glock 45, which is the exact same gun, basically. It just didn't come in flat dark earth. So you can do things like this Juliet Tango, which is about as crazy as you can get, I think. And this one has the same thing as that 19X. This is the Radian ramjet and afterburner where they Cerakote the actual compensator. And this one, they Cerakoted the Aimpoint Acro P2. It has a Surefire X300 Ultra, and this is just a phenomenally good looking gun, if you ask me. Shoots well, and the beauty of this is it has Glock's performance trigger. So a far better trigger than a stock Glock trigger. This thing is actually quite nice. For a Glock trigger, it doesn't get any better than that. But you can do that, or you could keep it plain Jane as far as modifications go, just with an interesting Cerakote, something like this. Now, this one is just a fun little thing. I saw this on Gunbroker and it just made me laugh. And it even has the ruler on top. So this is, I don't even actually shoot this gun. This is just, I'm a DeWalt tool guy. So saw this and was that, I want that. So that's a Glock 45, just for fun. This is a cool one. This is a Type A. This is a Glock 45, and Type A did all the work on this. They actually call it their EG 45, but just the same kind of modifications, except no barrel porting, no compensator, just threaded barrel, Trijicon RMR, and a Surefire X300 Ultra. This is a fun one. Or you can go with like a Triarch Glock 45, and this one also has the Radian ramjet and afterburner with the Trijicon RMR and a Surefire X300 Turbo. I really like Triarch system stuff. They make some really great guns. But I'm just showing you that there are limitless options that you can do to Glocks. There's just such a huge availability of third-party aftermarket accessories and people that work on them. But so you go from the 17 to the 19 to the 19X to the Glock 45, and then you get into different calibers, which you can get like a Glock 23, which is a 40 caliber. You can get into a Glock 21, which is a 45 ACP. You can go with a Glock 20, which is a 10 millimeter. This is my bear gun. This packs a wallop and has a much better capacity than any revolver. This is the Glock 20 MOS, so it does come optic ready, and this one has a Trijicon RMR on it and a magwell. Or you can go the other direction and get a Glock 44, and this one's chambered in 22. This thing, I mean, it feels like it wants to float away. These things are light, but great little 22 pistol. And then you can get into, say, one of their longer guns. So you can get a Glock 34, which is just a long, I mean, it's like a 17, but longer barrel. And they do have the Glock 17L, which is just a tad longer too. But this is a Gen 5 Glock 34. Then you can also get something like this is a Terran Tactical. This is a Combat Master Glock 34 with the 508T from Holosun with the Terran Tactical magwell. Or you can get into, this is a Gen 4 Glock 34 from Fowler Industries, which has a really cool frame on it with the big undercut on the trigger guard and the Holosun 508T, big window cut in the slide. This is a really nice shooting gun. And then you get into some of their more slim lines. So you got this little guy. This is a Glock 43, so designed as a carry gun. This one only has a capacity of 6+1, which I don't like. And this is an itty bitty little guy. And this one is from Triarch Systems. This one has a Holosun 507K on it. Then they came out with the 43X, which is just a little bigger than that 43 frame. So this is actually the same size frame as a Glock 19. So you can get a better purchase on it. And I carried this for a long time. But this one has a Trijicon RMR-CC and an agency barrel in titanium nitride. This was my go-to gun for quite some time. From that, you can step up to a Glock 48, which is the same size frame as that Glock 43X, just has a longer barrel. This one has a Holosun 507K, and downside is its 10-round magazine. But there is a company called Shield Arms which makes a 15-round magazine for these, except you have to change out your mag release because they are metal mags, and you don't want to run the stock polymer mag release that Glock makes with a steel mag. You want to run metal on metal or polymer on polymer. Then you can take that Glock 48 and make it a little more fancy, like what Triarch does here, and just same gun, just prettier, I guess. This is a Streamlight TLR6 light laser combo and has an agency titanium barrel, titanium nitride barrel in it. Holosun 507K. Okay, so that was some of my Glocks and different calibers, different variations and modifications and different versions of the same models, different models, just kind of a 30,000 foot view of Glock, what you can do to them, and the models and calibers that they come in. I obviously don't have every caliber or every model. I have quite a few, but I have a lot of 17s and 19s for the most part, 19Xs and Glock 45s that I've had modified, done work to, and they're just a lot of fun. I love to customize my handguns. I will say they don't get shot nearly as much as they used to because I'm kind of in my 2011 phase right now. But if you want to see some really cool, great Glocks, go to my Agency Arms video. You may or may not be a Glock fan, but that's kind of a little history, a little bit about where Glock came from. Hopefully we'll see something new from Glock in the future, but I wouldn't hold my breath. They haven't really got out of their lane just yet, but now that Gaston Glock is no longer with us, maybe we'll see some changes. Who knows? But anyway, I'm Jeff for the Weapon Collective, reminding you to keep your weapons collected and keep collecting your weapons. I'll catch you next time.